They told you to be kind, to be honest, to work hard, to treat others the way you want to be treated. And you listened. You showed up with an open heart. You kept your promises. You stayed loyal, even when it cost you. But here's the bitter truth. No one told you. You were never taught the rules. You were taught morality in a world that rewards strategy. You were taught to play fair in a game that's already rigged. You see, life isn't chaos. It's not random. It's not just bad luck or wrong timing. It's a set of invisible games, stacked on top of each other, running in the background. And unless you understand them, unless you know how they work, you are not playing. You are being played. Most people live their entire lives inside games they didn't choose, playing by rules they never questioned, losing pieces of themselves every day, and blaming themselves for not understanding why it hurts so much. But the pain, the betrayal, the constant confusion about who to trust, what to do, how to move, that's not failure. That's the consequence of being dropped into a game with no map. Here's the first thing you need to understand. Every interaction you have, every job, every relationship, every message you send is part of a game. Not childish games, strategic ones, psychological ones, powerful, subtle, and designed to reward certain behaviors while punishing others. Most men don't know they're playing. They just react. They chase. They comply. They become predictable. And in any real game, the predictable player is the one who gets exploited. That's the first game theory law we'll reveal today. The man who doesn't know the rules becomes the rule others play against. Let that sink in. Now, this video is not about turning you into a manipulative operator. It's about making you sovereign, about showing you how to navigate life with clarity, discipline, and power. Because when you understand the games, you no longer need to fight for control. You simply stop giving it away. We'll go deep into the prisoner's dilemma and why loyalty often gets punished. We'll expose the Nash Equilibrium and why most people settle into silent, collective mediocrity. We'll show how Jungian shadow work reveals the roles you were cast into and how to break the script. But before we dive into that, we have to answer one question. What game are you playing right now? Without realizing it, are you playing the status game, needing to be seen, liked, praised? The validation game, needing to feel needed, even if it drains you? The approval game, saying yes when your soul is screaming no? Or the avoidance game, pretending you don't care so you don't have to feel the pain of not winning? The worst position on the board is not the pawn, it's the player who doesn't know they're in the game. Because they confuse loyalty with wisdom. They confuse emotional reactivity with connection. They confuse availability with virtue. And they keep getting drained, used, left behind. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That includes living their entire lives playing someone else's game, wearing someone else's mask, following someone else's rules. This is the moment that changes. You're not here to be a pawn. You're not here to be used. You're not here to compete for crumbs on someone else's board. You're here to build the board. But first, you need to see it. In the next section, we'll expose the first rule of control. Why people betray you, even when loyalty would have been smarter. It's not about you. It's about the structure of the game. And once you understand it, you'll stop blaming yourself and start moving like a man who sees the whole board. This is Deionos, where timeless philosophy becomes a weapon in modern war. Before we proceed, please make sure to subscribe and like the video. Now, let's go deeper. Most betrayal in life doesn't come from malice. It comes from misaligned incentives. And unless you understand this, you'll keep being loyal to people who were never designed to be loyal back. This isn't personal. It's structural. Let me explain. In game theory, there is a concept called The prisoner's dilemma. Two criminals are arrested, separated, no communication. Each is offered a deal. If you betray the other and he stays silent, you go free. He gets 10 years. If you both betray each other, you each get 5 years. But if both stay loyal, you both walk away with just 1 year. What happens? Most betray, not because they hate each other, but because they're afraid the other one will betray them first. And so, self-interest overrides mutual benefit. Now pause, because this isn't about criminals, it's about you. Every relationship you've ever had, romantic, business, friendship, runs on this model. Should I give more or protect myself? Should I stay loyal or look out for number one? Should I trust her or keep an option open just in case? And if you don't see the game, you'll get blindsided every time. Here's the brutal truth. Loyalty gets punished when the system doesn't reward it. That's why you gave your all and got left behind. That's why you stood by them and they disappeared when you needed them. That's why your trust felt like weakness instead of strength. You weren't wrong for loving. You weren't weak for showing up. But you forgot one thing. You can't play a trust game with someone who only plays to win. Game theory doesn't care about your feelings. It only tracks patterns. And when people realize they can gain more from your compliance than from your consent, they'll betray you without blinking. Because in the game, betrayal often pays more than loyalty. That's the prisoner's dilemma. But here's the twist most never realize. The longer you react emotionally to betrayal, the more predictable you become. And predictable players, they're easy to manipulate. You get ghosted, you beg for answers, you get disrespected, you lash out, you get betrayed, you try to explain your worth. But the high-level player, he sees the game and steps out of it. That's the only way to win a rigged system. You stop trying to fix it, and you stop playing the wrong role in it. In the prisoner's dilemma, the only way to truly shift the game is to become someone who can afford to walk away, who doesn't need control, who doesn't need emotional reassurance, who knows his value and acts accordingly. You think they betrayed you because you weren't enough, but the truth is, you were just too easy to access. Incentives reveal loyalty, pressure reveals character, but power reveals the truth of who's really playing and who's just reacting. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. So, if betrayal destroys you, what part of you was attached to being needed? What part of you was still seeking to be chosen? What part of you was willing to give, even when nothing was being earned? That's the real game. Not just how others play you, but how you unconsciously let them. Here's what most men never learn. You can't fix betrayal by being more available. You can only end it by becoming less reactive. That's where we go next. We'll break down another trap that keeps powerful men stuck in average lives. It's called the Nash Equilibrium. And it's why your environment is dragging you down without you even realizing it. So you've seen how betrayal happens, not always out of cruelty, but because the system rewards it. Now, we go deeper, because there's a more subtle trap than betrayal. It doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like settling, like stagnation, like comfort, like silence. It's called the Nash Equilibrium, and it's one of the most dangerous forces in your life. Here's what it means. A Nash Equilibrium is a state in a game where no player can benefit by changing their strategy. If everyone else keeps theirs the same, it's the stable state where everyone adapts just enough to not lose, but not enough to actually win. It's when two enemies stop attacking, not because they found peace, but because constant war drains them both. It's when a man stays in a relationship that doesn't fulfill him, because leaving would hurt just enough to stay still. It's when you stop trying, not because you've accepted who you are, but because you're too tired to keep pushing against a system that resists change. That's the Nash trap. It's a system where everyone is doing what's just enough communication to avoid a breakup, just enough work to not get fired, just enough self-improvement to look like you care, just enough friendship to not feel alone. And the moment you try to rise, the system resists, not because it hates you, but because your growth breaks the equilibrium. And people fear change more than they fear failure. If you want to escape average, you have to be willing to disturb the system that keeps everyone comfortable. This is why you outgrow people, why you lose friends when you start building, why your partner starts arguments when you begin to level up, because your movement threatens the stillness they've normalized. Jung called it individuation, the process of separating from the collective in order to become whole. But the Nash trap is the opposite. It's the silent agreement to stay fractured together. Don't grow too fast. Don't ask for more. Don't think you're better than us. Stay predictable. Stay small. Stay available. That's not love. That's psychological control. So how do you escape it? You don't ask permission. You don't wait for the group to evolve with you. You break the cycle and let the pieces fall where they may. That means becoming a disruptor, not through chaos, but through discipline. You stop giving the minimum. You stop playing for approval. You stop staying quiet to keep the peace. And you become a man who moves differently. This won't be rewarded at first. You'll be called arrogant. You'll feel misunderstood. You'll be accused of changing. But here's the paradox of evolution. Only those willing to be alone become irreplaceable. Carl Jung said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. That's what your withdrawal creates. A new order, a new frame, one where you are no longer dependent on the rules others follow, because you've written your own." The Nash Equilibrium is not broken with emotion. It's broken with clarity, with refusal, with movement. And when you finally rise, you'll realize they weren't holding you back maliciously. They were just trying to keep the game comfortable for themselves. Coming up next, we go further into the most subtle manipulation of all, the shadow game, where you're not just reacting to others, you're living inside the roles they've projected onto you. And the moment you stop playing them, the system collapses. You're not just stuck in other people's games. You're stuck in roles they've handed you, masks they projected onto you, scripts you didn't write but memorized to survive. And here's the darkest part. The better you play those roles, the more invisible you become. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world's expectations. And for most men, that mask becomes a prison. The nice guy, the reliable one, the provider, the non-threatening guy, the yes man. You don't choose these roles. They're projected onto you, and you adopt them to feel safe, to be accepted, to avoid the chaos of rejection. People don't want you. They want the version of you that makes them comfortable. And once you start reacting from that place, you're not playing anymore. You're being programmed. Game theory doesn't only apply to external systems, it applies to identity. Because when everyone around you expects something from you, you begin to strategically comply. You say what they want to hear. You play it safe. You avoid conflict. Why? Because deep down, your nervous system associates authenticity with risk. So, you react, not to truth, but to maintain your role in their game. This is the shadow game, where your deeper self, the real you, gets locked behind persona after persona, until your entire life becomes a performance, a predictable script. And game theory tells us exactly what happens to predictable players. They get used, they get ignored, they get replaced. The ones who survive, they aren't cold, they aren't manipulative, they're just sovereign, because they've seen the game, They've faced their shadow. They've stopped playing the part. And in doing so, they become unreadable. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The shadow game is the unconscious role you've been playing to avoid pain. And when you break that role, when you go off script, everyone who benefited from the old version of you will feel threatened, because now you're no longer predictable, you're no longer easy to access, you're no longer emotionally reactive on command. This is when they'll say, "You've changed, you're not the same, you're distant, cold, arrogant." But what they really mean is, "You stopped letting me control the game." So how do you escape? You start noticing the roles people expect you to play, and you stop feeding them. That means you let the silence linger when they expect reassurance. You say no without explaining. You move without announcement. You hold your line, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Because if your boundaries are always soothing to others, they're not real boundaries. They're scripts. And here's what happens when you break the role. The projections shatter, and people finally have to face themselves. Your silence becomes a mirror. Your refusal becomes confrontation. Your sovereignty becomes a threat to their illusion. Not because you're trying to hurt anyone, but because you're no longer sacrificing your truth to maintain their comfort. This is the shadow game's end, when you reclaim the one thing you've been taught to surrender your entire life, your inner authority. And now, you're ready for the next level, the strategic mind, where emotion gives way to clarity, where every move is intentional, and where unreadability becomes your greatest weapon. Once you've removed the mask, you don't just become yourself. You become unreadable, not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped broadcasting your every thought like a signal flare. This is the beginning of strategic masculinity, where your actions are chosen, not triggered, where you stop trying to win through emotion and start moving like a man who understands leverage. Game theory has a concept called Tit-for-Tat. It's one of the most effective long-term strategies ever discovered, used in diplomacy, used in war, and yes, used in everyday life, even if most people don't realize it. Here's how it works. Tit-for-tat starts with cooperation. It assumes goodwill. But if the other player betrays or exploits, you respond once with equal retaliation. Then, you return to cooperation again. Simple, elegant, powerful, because it sends a message. I'm not hostile, but I will not be played. Now let's apply it to your life. When someone disrespects you, do you overreact and burn the bridge? Or do you show restraint, respond with clarity, and remain grounded? When a friend lets you down, do you beg, rage, or ghost? Or do you adjust your availability with precision and let your absence speak? Tit-for-tat is not about revenge. It's about trimming. It shows people where your boundaries are, without ever having to raise your voice. Powerful men don't need to announce their strength. They reveal it by what they tolerate and what they don't. This brings us to your real weapon in the modern world, tactical silence. Because in a world addicted to reaction, the man who doesn't flinch becomes terrifying. Let me show you how silence works. Someone disrespects you. You say nothing. Someone gossips about you. You don't defend yourself. Someone asks for your opinion to start a fight. You offer none. Why? Because most people don't want the truth. They want your energy. They want your reaction, your validation, your attention, your submission. When you deny them that, the game collapses. Silence isn't emptiness, it's sovereignty. It says, I don't need to convince you. I don't need to fix you. I don't need to explain myself. I move when I choose to, not when I'm provoked. This is how unreadable men rise. They don't rush. They don't overshare. They don't flinch in chaos. They speak less. but every word lands. They act less, but every move shifts the room because their presence is calibrated. Here's what most men don't realize. When you react emotionally, you become data. Your triggers become buttons. Your values become weapons. Your empathy becomes leverage. People don't need to overpower you. They just need to know how you tick. That's why unreadability is essential. Don't just be hard to hurt. Be hard to read. Carl Jung wrote about the danger of becoming what others expect. But he also warned about the man who becomes too transparent, because once they know your every move, you stop being a player and become the pawn again. So practice silence, practice observation, practice measured response. That's not coldness, that's discipline, and it's what allows you to stay in control, even when everything else is burning. We've now crossed into higher ground. You've seen the board, you've broken the mask, you've mastered the reaction. Now it's time to expose the bigger game behind all of this: status, attention, power, control, and how the modern world traps you in shallow games unless you learn to escape the simulation entirely. That's next. Everything you've learned so far about betrayal, about manipulation, about the roles you've been given, and the silence you've reclaimed, it all leads here, the hidden games behind the games, where people don't fight for truth. They fight for status. Status isn't money. It's not fame. It's not even real power. It's perceived value inside a particular frame. It's the illusion of importance. The game most people are addicted to, without even realizing it. Posting online to be seen, talking to be heard, not to understand, buying, wearing, saying things to signal rank, rather than embody worth. Welcome to the simulation. The loudest voices are often the weakest hands. They need to be seen, because they don't feel real unless they're noticed. But here's the dark twist. Even men chasing discipline, growth, and self-mastery can get trapped here too. Posting every gym session, bragging about monk mode, measuring worth by attention. It's still the same game, just dressed in better language. Game theory calls this signaling theory. Every action becomes a signal, not for truth, but for position. You flex money to signal power. You quote books to signal intelligence. You ghost people to signal high value. But the man who constantly signals isn't playing to win. He's playing to be seen as a winner. That's not mastery. That's mimicry. The world is now a war of frames, each person trying to pull you into their game, to make you play by their emotional rules. The woman who says you're too cold, the friend who jokes when you set boundaries, the business partner who pressures you for fast decisions. These are not random interactions. They're power frames, attempts to lower your status, so you'll seek theirs. The average man defends himself, explains himself, proves himself, and in doing so, gives up the frame. The sovereign man, he doesn't fight for status. He doesn't play for perception. He moves from position, not performance. Because when you stop chasing status, you become status. In a world of noise, presence is power. Stillness becomes threat. Boundaries become gravity. People lean in when you say less. They respect you when you stop trying to be respected. They follow you when you stop signaling that you should be followed. That's not charisma. That's frame control. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But who you truly are cannot exist inside the frames others place on you." And that's why most men never find themselves, because they never stop playing for perception. They think they're evolving, but they're just leveling up their costume. So how do you escape? Not with rebellion, not with anger, not by burning everything down. You escape by no longer needing to be seen. You do the work when no one claps. You master your discipline without the dopamine of validation. You remain silent in rooms that run on noise and let your presence do the speaking. This is the end of the simulation, when your power no longer depends on their reaction. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you free. You've seen the hidden games. You've mastered reaction. You've exited the simulation. Now, there's only one move left. Don't just escape the game. Build the board. We close everything in the next and final chapter. You were never meant to be a pawn, never meant to spend your life reacting, explaining, performing. You were born to see the board, to master the rules, and then to build your own. That's the final move. Not winning the old game, but outgrowing it so completely. It collapses beneath your feet. Let the world chase relevance. You chase alignment. Let them play for status. You move from stillness. Let them beg to be seen. You become the man who sees. You've now done what most never will. You've seen the betrayal was structural, not personal. You've broken the silence with precision, not noise. You've shattered the projections, burned the script, and reclaimed your energy. So, what comes next? Creation. Because when you no longer need to be chosen, you can finally choose yourself. And from that place, you don't just opt out of the game, you design a new one where your values determine the rules, one where discipline builds leverage, one where silence creates tension, and clarity creates power. Not everyone will understand you. That's the point. You weren't made to be relatable. You were made to be rare. A man who is whole needs no role. He doesn't bend to expectations. He doesn't perform. He just is. That's not arrogance. That's the death of dependence, the beginning of sovereignty. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because the moment you do, you lose your ability to be controlled. You stop playing for crumbs of approval. You stop orbiting other people's needs, games, and wounds, and you become gravity. You'll lose people. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be accused of changing. But the men who change the world are the ones who refuse to stay predictable just to be liked. You'll no longer be invited to every table, but you'll realize the man who owns the table never begs for a seat." So here's your challenge. Look at your life, not from emotion, but from elevation. What games are still being played without your consent? What masks are you still wearing because they feel safe? What reactions are you still offering in place of real presence? And more than anything, what board are you going to build now that you've left theirs? You've come full circle. This is not the end. It's your initiation into something most men never reach. A life beyond reaction, beyond performance, beyond simulation. A life where your peace is earned, your presence is sharp, and your power is chosen. They'll try to pull you back into the old game. They'll poke, provoke, perform. But the man who understands the rules and refuses to play becomes the game. And that man is remembered forever. This is Deionos. Subscribe, watch, awaken, and become the man who no longer plays to win, but plays to create.